Well, thank you guys for your patience. My name is Petra Duran-Gehring, and I'm the Ultrasound Director at the University of Florida in Jacksonville. Oh, yeah, is it working now? Okay, now can you hear me? Awesome. All right, great, thank you. All right, so my talk today is A Tale of Two Courses, or how to increase interactivity in an ultrasound course that has been affected by COVID-19. So I wanted to share my story about two courses that I did this past year and a half. And so there are two different types of courses. I did one that was a purely didactic course, and then the other one was a hands-on technical skill session. And so I'm going to tell you about three major things, which is one, what are the problems and pitfalls that I faced in trying to convert something that is traditionally a hands-on skill into the virtual realm. I'm going to go over some ways to maximize virtual programs, and then lastly we're going to talk about a little bit of using some of the things that you may already have in your simulation center, such as video converters and gaming technology. Okay, so our story begins in early 2020, and I really thought 2020 was going to be my year. So I had two different courses that I was teaching for national organizations, ASEP and then SEMPA, which is the Society of Emergency Medicine PAs. And so I was really excited about what was going on to happen this year academically. So in March of 2020, my team of ultrasound faculty and I were preparing to go to SEMPA 360, which is their national meeting, where we actually were doing two different types of ultrasound hands-on workshops. But right before we were headed out, about 2 days before that, that's when the COVID pandemic really bloomed and everything got canceled. Whoops. And so, as you can imagine, with just 2 days to kind of prepare, we really didn't have time to convert anything to virtual, and so the meeting was just canceled. And we all went on lockdown. And then you know the rest of the story, in that over the next several months as the COVID pandemic is raging, and we kind of settle into our new norms of mask mandates and social distancing and PPE shortages and Zoom meetings. As we kind of continue to prepare for these courses later in the year, we realized that this is really not going to happen. And so I was running a pre-conference for ASEP, and so we found out that ASEP was going to be made virtual, which meant my pre-con was also going to become virtual, and they were going to be pushing us out to Zoom, not just right at ASEP, but actually 3 weeks prior. So you can imagine that now my timeline is suddenly really compressed. And so just to tell you a little bit about the course I normally do, it's the Emergency Ultrasound Management course. And so in this course, we really pride ourselves on our interactivity between our course participants and ultrasound leaders. And so when we do this, we have two different tracks of content. We have didactic sessions, we have small group sessions, and so this is we really pride ourselves on that interactivity. So as the executive director of the course, it was really my job to lead us into the virtual realm while still maintaining the integrity of the course. And so when I found out we're going to be using Zoom, I then took a deep dive into Zoom. So I read the entire user's manual, I watched video tutorials, I played with different features, I did a lot of rehearsals because what I really wanted to do was truly try to continue to keep my course as it was. So in the end, I became a Zoom master. And so that allowed me to continue to have two tracks of content. And so that meant we had two separate Zoom links. And then at midday, we would bring everybody together, and so we would do breakout sessions, and then we would have a whole session at the end with COVID-relevant content. And so what that looked like was that we kind of tried to work around the problem, which meant instead of having our lecturers present live, we actually asked them to send us recorded lectures. I was really concerned about video connectivity at the beginning of the pandemic, so we actually played their video recordings while they were actually there. And so that was great, and then it allowed them to moderate their own lecture. So when people had questions and they put it in the chat, they were able to not only respond and answer those questions, but they could also incorporate links and different papers or other video content as well. We also normally in the course would use something like Poll Everywhere to kind of interact with our participants, and so we were able to use the poll feature in Zoom to continue to do that. And then lastly, to get our breakout sessions so we're not wasting a lot of time trying to move people around, since we had everybody register for the course, we were able to sort them into breakout groups. So when we got to those breakout sessions, we could move them into that virtual breakout room with just the click of a button. We ended the course with our traditional cocktail reception. We did this kind of Brady Bunch style where you were, kind of trying to interact with each other, like introduce yourself to the person who's above you or to the left of you. And then the other feature that we really used that worked really well for us was Zoom allows you to send a post-course evaluation to all your participants. So that way as soon as the course ended, we could send that evaluation automatically. We didn't have to do anything further. So I felt pretty good about myself. Like I'd gotten my course. I was proud of how it came up. And so I felt like I'd gotten, some training under my belt with Zoom. And when SAEMPA came back later in the year and said, hey, can you take your hands-on skills workshops and create something in the virtual realm, I had to really think about that because it's a completely different type of learning. And so immediately what came to mind are those 5-minute Sono videos where you see this beautiful video of someone scanning a patient side by side with an actual real-time ultrasound image. And so I thought, like, hey, could I create that and create a virtual scan session with my participants? And so the more I started thinking about that idea, I pitched that to SAEMPA in that we would have 3 different cameras kind of placed around the bedside of our model, and then we would actually scan in real time, and we would use that interactivity that we'd used in Zoom to kind of continue to allow our participants to drive where we were placing our probe and what probe manipulations we would do. And so SAEMPA really liked that. They said, that's great. And so I gathered my team together of 3 different institutions. We made sure that everybody had either a simulation center or a video conferencing studio, and they would have cameras set up. They would have a model. We would all be discussing the same thing. And then that way we could take our participant group and divide them into different rooms so that we could then have that same interactive experience. So that was great. Felt really good about that. But then SAEMPA came back and said, well, we're not going to be using Zoom. We're actually going to be using Juno. And if you don't know what Juno is a large web conferencing software. ASAP and SAEM both used that for their annual meeting last year. And so it is a webinar type of platform, which is great if you're just giving a lecture. But if you're trying to do something interactive, it's not quite what you would expect. The other issue is that it also is very proprietary, meaning that only large organizations will have access to it. It's not something where you can just, download, Juno and play around with it. So I didn't have any experience with what I was then kind of stepping into. And so we were told that, if you want to go into a Juno room and you kind of see what it's like, we'll let you have an hour a week before your session. I fretted about that quite a bit. And so when we got into our session, we realized we had 2 major problems. The first one was the interactivity. So Juno is great if you were doing a lecture because you don't have to worry about anybody not muting themselves as they're coming into it and interrupting your lecture. But it doesn't allow for a ton of interactivity. So the only way you can really interact is in the chat and via emoji, which was one problem. The second problem was something that I had not accounted for when I came up with this idea. You see, I would naively thought that I could just take my ultrasound machine and plug it into my laptop. The same way that I normally would plug my ultrasound machine into a video monitor when we're teaching so that everybody around the bedside could actually get a better view of what's on the screen. Unfortunately, you can't just do that. So we had to work around that problem of how can we do this? And so I then started kind of polling people around the country, talking to people and saying, how are you live scanning with your residents, your medical students, when you can't be in person for the COVID pandemic? And the answer resoundingly I got was, we're not. And so there was really 2 options that were presented to me. And one of them was, you record a video, you splice it together and make this beautiful product. But that didn't really give me the interaction that I wanted. And so the other option people were using were they're either using their phones to record things and to FaceTime with people, or taking webcams and actually putting it in front of the ultrasound machine. And I really didn't like either one of those ideas. It didn't really meet my vision. So we took this deep dive down the internet rabbit hole trying to find an answer to this question. And it was really my partner, Andrew Shannon, who actually came up with a really simple solution. All we needed was a video converter box. And so the cool thing for us was we only had less than a week now to figure this out, but our Sim Center actually uses the B-line simulation system. High fidelity mannequins that have actually a video converter box as part of the system. So when you use it in, for simulation, it allows you to kind of enrich your simulation experience by incorporating video. But in our case, we channeled MacGyver, and we literally took the video converter box off of the Sim Center system. And when we did that, we were actually able to cannibalize it and attach it to our ultrasound machine and computer, and voila! You were able to get a side-by-side image, which is what I had been trying to do, of a live scan. So I could then toggle between cameras, and then I could also present my ultrasound machine. So we specifically had to use this program called Panopto, which at our institution, it was a free download. And so this is what it looks like in real time. So you can see over here that I'm actually scanning the patient, and you can see me moving my hand position. I can then toggle between cameras. So if I want to show that same image, but from a different angle, I can easily do that with Panopto, and it allowed me to be able to actually scan in real time. So first, when we did the SEMPA course, we were able to still allow our participants to kind of interact with us, even if it was just asking us questions in chat. How can you get a better right upper quadrant view? And then we would show them and talk through that. So I think that this gave us a lot of opportunity for how we can use this in austere environments or distance learning. And that's really what my focus has now become, because I think this is such a great way for us to kind of move forward if we ever have another pandemic, or if we're just trying to teach somewhere where we're not live. And so moving forward then, there's a couple of things that I've learned from this whole experience that I'd like to share with you. So there's really 5 things that I think will be important for you to incorporate if you were going to do this yourself in the future. The first thing is, know what you're stepping into. And so know what program you're going to be using, whether it be Microsoft Teams, Juno, Skype, whatever. Be understanding of what that program entails so that you're not surprised like I was to learn that Juno doesn't do this. And so what I mean more specifically is, this is just an example for Zoom, but there's a difference between meetings and webinars. Webinars allow you to speak to a lot of people, but the interactivity is very limited. So for a didactic course, this is a great option. You don't have to worry about people, flushing their toilet in the background because they forgot to mute themselves or yelling at their dog. Those are things that will keep your focus on your speaker. On the other hand, if you're trying to do a technical skill course, then something that has a meeting function to allow you to have smaller groups and you get that interactivity is really important. Second thing is knowing the features of whatever program you're using. So this is an example of Zoom. And so, we use Zoom a lot for meetings, but it has a lot of other functionality to it that you can actually use for education. So in this case, if I'm scanning with a learner and I say, I want you to show me where to place the probe for that right upper quadrant view, they can then use the annotate function to actually draw exactly where I should put my probe. Okay, so I'm going to put my probe right there, you think? Let's do that. Let's put the probe right there. Okay, I got this image. Great. I want you to point to me where, or draw on here, where did you find Morrison's pouch? And so then they can also use the draw function to do that. And so that allows you to really interact with your learners in a way that if you were just lecturing to them, you wouldn't. So trying to get them to be participating into the experience, I think, is really important. One of the other features that I just want to quickly mention is the whiteboard function. So I'm a very visual learner, and when I teach, I draw a lot. So if I'm doing a small didactic with a group, I can use that whiteboard function to talk to them about it, but also draw and make it more interactive. I can then ask them to draw something for me. What do you think this is going to look like? And that allows us to have that same conversation that we would have had in person if we're in a conference room and at the whiteboard kind of going through our same lecture. The third thing I want to mention is backup. And so after I did these two courses, with the management course, we had people send us their lecture, and so we played their recorded lecture. Earlier this year, I was involved in, I was the course director for the ASAP Emergency Ultrasound board review course. And so in that course, we actually had everybody send us their lectures as a backup because we wanted people to actually give live lectures. But I was terrified that we were going to have some sort of failure, and we did. It was actually my lecture. On the very first day, mid-lecture, my internet connection went down, and nobody could hear me. And so I didn't know that was even happening because I'm still talking, thinking people are listening to me. And in the background, other course director was actually able to start my lecture until I could get back online. It happened to me, and then it happened later on to somebody else on one of the other days. So that was a really nice way for us to be prepared on the fly. And so we could actually use that to kind of quickly get their lecture going so we weren't wasting time and losing content. And it allowed the lecturer to kind of get their thoughts together before they restarted their lecture so they weren't completely thrown off. My fourth point is get help. And so when I think about that, there's really two ideas here. One, if it's a didactic, you want to make sure that you have somebody who can actually manage the chat. So when we did the board review class, since we had everybody's slides and all of their references, when people would ask questions during that live lecture, we could actually pull their slides up and answer the slides from the question, incorporating references and everything, so that made it a much richer experience. And then if you're doing a technical skill program, having someone to be your co-host is always nice because then you have somebody to kind of play against and to act as another learner. So, Duran, I really don't understand how to get that left upper quadrant view. Let me show you. Here are some tips and tricks. And so that's a nice way to do that. And then the last thing to do, if you're considering doing a live procedural course, and so you can do that whether it be ultrasound or if it be any other procedure, video laryngoscopy or anything else, I would highly suggest investing in a video converter box. If you can't steal one from your SIM center, then you could always buy one yourself, this is the EpiFen, and it is $400 to $800. And I work for a county hospital. We don't have a lot of money. So I was trying to think of ways that I could actually go, still use that same type of idea, but in a much cheaper way. And it was actually my 12-year-old son who came up with a solution for me. So he asked, I really want to turn my iMac into a video screen while I'm playing with my friends online. And so he actually did the deep dive down the internet and actually found this product. This is actually from Amazon. It's called the Elgato HD60S Plus. And it retails for $180. So my son got to do some video gaming online with his friends, and I actually was able to use that for ultrasound education. This is just an example, but if you think about all of these video gaming technology, they use all the same functionality. And so this is specifically the proprietary software that comes with this particular option. You could actually still use Panopto if you have that. It works just as well with that. But this one is really nice in that you can see it allows me to toggle between cameras. And then it also shows you a live view there. It also allowed me to put in this nice little graphic. So if you're teaching at a course, you can also put in your logo or a picture of it or anything else. So it's a nice functionality. And just to kind of show you what that looks like, this is what the actual program looks like. It does allow you to connect directly to YouTube, Twitch, and a lot of other types of things. So if you are somewhere where you don't have access to Zoom or some other webcasting product, you could actually just use gaming technology and use it for what, in the same way that, our kids use connect to video gaming, streaming. The other last little tidbit I'm going to say about this product specifically is that it has Screen Link. And so it allows you to connect to Apple products wirelessly. So let's say you are out somewhere in a austere environment, but you happen to have your iPhone with you and let's say Butterfly or whatever other handheld, you could actually connect to it wirelessly and it would still allow you to live scan with your learners. So in conclusion, I will say that 2020 did not quite end up the way I thought it was, but I think I actually got more out of it than I was expecting. And what I've learned is that necessity is the mother of invention, but MacGyver is often the father. So the next time you're thinking about creating something and you're having to suddenly convert something to the virtual realm, just remember to think outside the box, because you never know how creative you can be. Thank you. Any questions? Sure. Awesome. That's a great option. Awesome. Yeah, I think that there's probably a lot of different ones. I've had people kind of talk to me about a bunch of different ones. It just happened to be that this one is super cheap, and so if you are looking to go, like we were planning on using this for our global health program, it's so inexpensive and that you could easily get this, and if you lose it or whatever, you're not losing a huge investment of something like the EpiFen, which was so expensive for a SIM center. But yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to do this. My future, like what we're working on as far as research projects right now, is actually taking that idea of the live scan and using only verbal cues, and that same idea of asking participants to tell me where on the screen you want me to put my probe. Okay, I put it here. Now, using those cardinal kind of ultrasound movements that have been written about by Dave Bonner's group, actually saying, okay, what do you want me to do? You want me to fan through that? This is what this looks like. Okay, now how can we correct this image? What can we do to like optimize that image? And trying to see if that really is an option for us moving forward in the future. So that's kind of what my research is working on right now. So that is, more to come on that, but I think that this is such a thing that we're going to end up having to face a lot more and more as time goes on. Any other questions? It sounds like we're a little late to the opening party, so I apologize for the technical difficulties. Thank you, guys.